perhaps the Trump administration is going to target goods instead of countries. And of course, you know, against China, that's going to be immediate and that's going to be very quick because Section 301 tariffs, the ones that are used for China, those are going to go into place immediately. There's no investigation that's needed to start those, so he will immediately impose those. But then against other countries, he may not target the countries directly. He may just target specific goods.
Now, Donald Trump will be sworn in as president for the second time in just 8 days. And it's still not clear whether he'll follow through on his threat to widespread tariffs. The International Monetary Fund warned this week that the ongoing uncertainty is making global markets jittery and driving up costs of borrowing. Now, Trump leaned heavily in on tariffs in his first administration as part of his America First policy, which was meant to protect American industries and reshape the global trade dynamics. Remember, he kept saying tariffs, my favorite word. But exactly what impact did these tariffs have the first time round? Did foreign companies end up forking out as much money as Trump had hoped? Well, joining us now is Jesus Salas, Associate Professor of Finance at Lehigh University and another co-author of the study into how firms avoided paying these tariffs. Jesus, thank you so much for giving us your time. Welcome to the show.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. And it's Lehigh University, but that's great.
Thanks for correcting me. Tell me a little bit about what happened the first time round, because we've known that Trump has always been a big fan of tariffs. He thinks tariffs are the great big stick that he can actually get people into line with. So what happened the first time round?
Yeah, so there were two types of tariffs. One was towards steel and aluminum, and the other one was, basically towards every product that's imported from China. And they were using two different protocols, I suppose, to enact these tariffs. The big one was really, against China because, it's still in place right now. And the big one, the big highlight here is that there was a 20% tariff on basically $450 billion worth of goods coming from China. And that initial reports, and research suggest that prices to those goods did go up in the U.S. as a result of these tariffs.
And were they popular with the U.S. consumers? Because, of course, the tariffs issue sometimes gets misunderstood. It is the consumer who faces higher prices.
Yeah, clearly, right? So we all know that now. There was still debate, and the Make America Great Again movement believes that that's not the case, but, it really is the consumer that ends up paying those. I'll say that the farmers were actually suffering quite a bit. And in fact, Trump had to give subsidies to those farmers who actually suffered quite a bit because of those tariffs, and partly because of the retaliation, right? It's not just that consumers pay higher costs for the goods that are imported from China, but China and other countries retaliated against U.S. Exporters, right? And then they were affected, in turn, and they had to reduce their exports because there was lower demand for those products. So you could really feel the effect of the tariffs in the U.S. in many different ways. And yet there's still very big supporters to those tariffs. In fact, the Biden administration basically kept the same tariffs that on China in place. They're essentially the same tariffs that Trump had imposed. Biden kept them basically the same way.
What do you envisage happening when Trump gets into office in just 8 days' time? Is there going to be bartering from countries who wish to avoid them, companies who wish to avoid them? How can they try and avoid them?
Yeah, that's a big question, right? So we don't really know exactly what's going to happen. I could give you some, ideas of what are some rumors that people are talking about. So, for example, now there's a discussion among insiders apparently who are speaking to the press that perhaps the Trump administration is going to target goods instead of countries, and of course, against China, that's going to be immediate and that's going to be very quick because Section 301 tariffs, the ones that are used for China, those are going to go into place immediately. There's no investigation that's needed to start those, so he will immediately impose those. But then against other countries, he may not target the countries directly. He may just target specific goods by using Section 232 tariffs. And the reason that's important for the second part of your question as to like how you can avoid those tariffs is that, Section 301 tariffs, the ones that were targeting China, you could somewhat avoid them by shifting operations to other countries, right? Because you could just make the product in a different country. It was the same Chinese firms that are actually just making the product in a different country, Thailand, Malaysia, Africa, some other countries. But if you target specific products, then you won't be able to as easily avoid those tariffs. Now, there are other things that firms and countries are doing. As you said, countries are going to be negotiating behind the scenes. They don't want to make these negotiations public. I know that they're already having conversations with Trump. The Mexican president is already having conversations with Trump. Around the world, leaders are having conversations with Trump. We don't really know what's going to happen as a result of those conversations, but certainly, that's part of the process. There's also going to be lobbying. I mean, law firms, you can Google law firms and tariffs, and there's plenty of law firms that are ready to help. Lobbying activities, pressuring politicians to maybe, exclude some industries, exclude some products in particular, because they will say that, it helps protect American interests. They could also try to reduce the value of the products that are exported to the U.S. Like, for example, maybe send some more raw materials and unfinished goods and then maybe just assemble them in the U.S. That way, the value of the goods that are exported to the U.S. is lower, and therefore the tariffs are lower. So, I mean, there's really a lot of things that can be done. Obviously, the Trump administration is looking at these things and try to figure out if there's ways in the way that they structure these tariffs so that it's more difficult to avoid them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot to be done. We're going to be seeing a lot of negotiations, a lot of trying to get to the front of the queue, I'm sure, in the next month. Jesus Salas, thank you so much for giving us your time. Associate Professor of Finance at Lehigh University.